In the dead of night, around 3:30, our boots hit the ground. Who in their right mind would be awake at such an hour? The answer, us Marines, and we had a valid reason. We were gearing up for a vehicle gunnery range session. Semper Fi, the Marine Corps has a tradition of beginning at the crack of dawn. The ramp was bathed in darkness, eerily silent. No child was out and about at that time. It was just us, attending to our duties. The vehicles we were gearing up, they were AAAV-7A1 Rams, colossal beasts on tracks, a heritage from the 70s, but constantly upgraded. Their primary mission, transporting Marines from ships straight to the shores, only to climb up the beaches and offload Marines. Once on land, these mechanical titans provided heavy machine gun cover, an impressive sight, to say the least. But there was a catch. These beasts were death traps in disguise. Their aluminum exterior and flat base made them a target for just about anything that wanted to harm us. Sitting in one of these, I tried to shake off my drowsiness, peering out and observing the Marines of my section preparing their respective vehicles. My attention was abruptly interrupted as my driver, a young corporal, approached. He hesitated, the way fresh recruits often do when addressing someone of higher rank. "What is it, Marine?" I barked, my intolerance for early mornings evident in my tone. "Got a minute, Corporal?" he mumbled, fumbling with a can of tobacco. Politely, he offered me some, but I declined. As he took a pinch for himself, he inquired, "Heard about Baggy Dick's wife?" For clarity, Baggy Dick was one of our own, a member of our platoon. The name might sound derogatory, but in truth, it was a playful moniker. Baggy Dick might have been the least impressive Marine to come out of boot camp, always messing up his ranks or making uniform blunders, but he had a heart of gold. If anyone was injured during PT, he'd be the first on the scene, attempting to give aid, even if he was clueless about it. If a Marine received distressing news from home, Baggy Dick was the one offering a listening ear. Over in the distance, silhouetted by the minimal morning light, I spotted Baggy Dick, distractedly glancing at his phone. The air around him seemed tense. "Trouble in paradise?" I inquired, taking a sip of my less than stellar coffee. My driver, after maneuvering the tobacco in his mouth, spoke up. "She didn't return home last night, and she ain't picking up his calls either." I stared at Baggy Dick for a moment, watching him dial once again, hope evident in his posture. But as seconds ticked by, his shoulders drooped in despair. The weight of concern hit me. I turned back to my driver, determination in my voice. "Get the gear ready. I'll check on him." For those not in the know, a dungeon monkey is what we sometimes call the recruit responsible for the troop compartment, often referred to as the dungeon. Some guys jokingly refer to this position as the dungeon master, but I personally think dungeon monkey has a funnier ring to it. Pushing myself up from my seat, I trudged a few tracks over to where Baggy Dick stood. The man was practically glaring at his phone, his grip so tight it looked like he was about to snap the device in two. "Ready to head out, Bag?" I called out. Now, under normal circumstances, protocol dictates a certain manner of response, something like a crisp, "Yes, Corporal," or the ever-enthusiastic, "Ora, Corporal." But Bag, bless him, was never quite attuned to the nuances of Marine decorum. As his NCO, it was technically my prerogative to give him a piece of my mind, but that wasn't why I was there. And truth be told, coming down hard just wasn't in my nature. "Something on your mind, Bag?" I prodded gently. He looked up from his phone, visibly distressed. "My wife didn't come home from her shift. She wasn't there when I woke up. I'm starting to get really worried," he admitted. Trying to console him, I was about to suggest maybe her phone died or something, but I was thrown off when he continued. "She usually calls if she's staying over at a girlfriend's place, or if she, goes home with some guy." I froze. "Wait, what?" "She does." "What now?" Bag's face turned a shade paler, realizing the gravity of what he'd just admitted. It's an arrangement we have. I can do the same. Not with guys. mind you," he quickly added, perhaps sensing my confusion. I held up my hand, trying to process everything. Cheating, even if consensual, falls under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It could lead to jail time, demotion, and loss of pay. But before things spiraled out of control, I took a deep breath and tried to regain my composure. "Listen, Bag," I began, taking another gulp of my subpar coffee. "Let's not jump to conclusions here. Maybe her phone's dead. Maybe she lost track of time. Let's keep our focus on the task at hand, and if you haven't heard from her by midday, we'll figure something out." His eyes flitted between me and his phone. Yeah, I can do that, Corporal." Giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder, I added, "It'll probably be okay, Bag. Remember, looking out for you guys is half my job." As I walked back, I passed Bag's crew chief, still dragging his gear and looking like he barely made it on time. "Late night, huh?" I teased him. Without missing a beat, he flashed a mischievous grin and threw up both middle fingers, likely still buzzing from the previous night's antics. My initial irritation faded, recognizing my own younger self in him. Turning my focus back to Baggy Dick, I noticed he managed to prep his vehicle without anyone watching over him. As the call to mount up echoed around us, it dawned on me just how resilient some of these guys could be, even in the midst of personal turmoil. There was this fleeting thought, perhaps an inkling of hope, that maybe there was a fighting chance for young Baggy Dick yet. Our routine procedures were unfolding smoothly. We had done the communications check and lined our vehicles neatly at the ramp's back gate. Just as I was about to shift my focus to the upcoming journey, my driver's voice, distorted by the CMC helmet, broke the silence. "Corporal, I think I spotted someone lurking in the tree line." The mention of this sent an icy shiver cascading down my spine. Waving it off, I tried to reassure him. "Just let it be. We're moving out shortly, and I highly doubt they'd follow us." Peering down, I noticed my driver's bewildered expression. He was undoubtedly baffled by my reference to her. Before he could utter a word, I snapped, "Just focus on the road ahead." Memories of the eerie little girl from the ramp resurfaced. While my time working there had desensitized me somewhat to the ghostly tales, a part of me was genuinely unsettled at the thought of encountering her again. My attention shifted to the dungeon monkey below, and I signaled with an extended fist and splayed fingers, asking if everything was okay. Mirroring my gesture, he returned a thumbs up, indicating the absence of any immediate fires. Despite our inability to communicate verbally due to a glitch in his comms box, we managed just fine with these non-verbal cues. Energized, I tapped my helmet, rallying the team. "All right, gentlemen, let's kick this into high gear and go make some noise." One thing I'd learned as an NKO was that dropping a motivating line every now and then helped boost the spirits. I could feel the heavy lurch of our vehicle as the driver shifted gears. There's nothing quite like the sensation when a 903 cubic inch turbo diesel engine propels 26 tons of sheer might and allure, a sound that's akin to a chain-smoking Valkyrie belting out a war cry. It's a sensation I genuinely miss, especially with the Marine Corps gradually transitioning from our iconic AVs to newer, sleeker Italian armored vehicles. Our convoy was just about to negotiate the intersection of the tank trail and road when our section leader's voice blared over the platoon net. "All vehicles, stay alert. We've got some movement in the tree line to our far left." The warning was crystal clear: tread cautiously and keep a sharp eye. Most of us in the track community have our own colloquialisms. Anyone outside our circle we called piogis, persons other than grunt. And then there were the crunchies, a morbid joke referencing the unfortunate souls who end up under the tracks. It's a peculiar kind of humor, but it's ours. A strange knot of unease began to tighten in my gut. I had an eerie premonition that this wasn't going to be just any other day. Crossing a road with these massive vehicles is a procedure in itself. Road guards are dispatched to halt traffic, ensuring a smooth passage for our tracks. This reminded me of a wild tale I'd once heard. the 2nd Tank Battalion, in their rebellious spirit, often bypassed these protocols. That is until one fateful night when a speeding Ford Fiesta, with a captain at the wheel, collided with an M1A1 Abrams tank. The aftermath was pure carnage. That small vehicle was practically atomized on impact. The captain, tragically, didn't fare any better. Bits and fragments were all that remained. If anyone ever pondered the durability of a Ford against a behemoth like the Abrams, let's just say the car is no match for a tank's menacing armor. As our convoy continued its journey, I noticed some movement among the trees on the opposite side of the road. Squinting to get a clearer view, I couldn't identify anything definite. Rather than reporting it, I decided to hold off. It might have been a fleeting shadow or a creature of the forest. Besides, causing unnecessary alarm would only add to the tension. Our progression seemed slower than usual, and it struck me as odd. We weren't nearing any of the regular stopping points, such as a road crossing. As I pondered this, the voice of Bone Crusher, our revered platoon sergeant, echoed through the radio. He was inquiring about the reason for our sudden deceleration. Amidst the chatter, the crew chief of Bag of Dicks came on, his voice dripping with sarcasm, suggesting that their driver had probably lost his nerve. He even took a jab at the driver's personal life, implying it was the reason behind his wife's departure. Hearing this public airing of personal grievances irked me. Sure, Bag of Dicks had earned a less than stellar reputation, but at the end of the day, he was still one of us, a fellow Marine. Broadcasting such issues, especially when we were on the brink of handling lethal machinery, was hardly conducive to team morale. Tuning out the radio banter, I retrieved my lighter from my pocket, igniting a cigarette. The swirling tendrils of smoke were oddly comforting. As I inhaled, my driver's anxious voice reached out to me. He mentioned seeing some shadowy figure moving parallel to us within the forest. Attempting to redirect his attention, I urged him to focus on the road, assuring him that I'd keep an eye on the woods. Yet, deep down, I too was eager for a distraction, something to keep my mind off the eerie happenings. Peering ahead, I spotted the crew chief and the equivalent of a dungeon monkey from the vehicle in front. They were both intently staring towards the woods. It became painfully evident that we were not alone. Something or someone was lurking close by, watching our every move. My gut feeling told me that it wasn't the spectral little girl from the tales. But then again, assumptions in such scenarios can often be misleading. As dawn approached, the sky transformed into a canvas of vibrant pinks and oranges. This hint of daylight boosted my spirits momentarily. However, our relief was short-lived. As we neared the last road crossing leading to the range, a dense fog enveloped the area. The mist was so thick, it seemed as if we were venturing into an ethereal realm. This unexpected curtain of white added another layer of challenge to our road crossing, given the reduced visibility and the inherent risks involved. Ensuring safety, we dispatched ground guides, one at the front and another at the rear of each vehicle. Their role was crucial, especially in such treacherous conditions, guiding the track vehicles through tight or potentially hazardous spots. Through the thick fog, the silhouette of our dungeon monkey was barely discernible. Suddenly, a burst of red illuminated the scene as he activated a chemlight. Its glow rendered him almost otherworldly, resembling a war-hardened dwarf from some dark legend. Recognizing the practicality of the idea, he ignited another chemlight and tossed it my way. With these luminescent tools, our visibility improved markedly, especially since our outdated flashlights from the 80s had long since given up the ghost. Dungeon Monkey, though hailing from the distant plains of Georgia, possessed a sharpness that defied his humble origins. It was obvious in the way he responded to every situation, and today was no exception. As the next step in our military exercise, we orchestrated the vehicles to reach their designated firing points before retreating to their ramps. Rejoining my comrades at the back of our armored vehicle, I threw a query towards the driver, checking on the vehicle's condition. "Everything's in order, Corporal," he assured me, albeit with a tinge of unease. This thick blanket of fog seemed to have taken a toll on everyone's spirits, including Dungeon Monkey, who clutched the pack of cigarettes I had tossed to him earlier. His usual vibrant demeanor seemed subdued. The eerie stillness of the fog, combined with whatever they might have glimpsed in it, had left both him and our driver noticeably shaken. Attempting to lift their spirits and refocus their attention on the task at hand, I urged them to ensure our guns were primed and ready. They hesitated for a brief moment, seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Snapping them back to reality, I reminded them of the urgency of the situation. At my prodding, the driver ascended the ramp into the vehicle, while Dungeon Monkey commenced his inspection around the vehicle's suspension. The dense fog seemed to tighten its grasp around us. Though it could have been my imagination playing tricks on me, the claustrophobic feeling was inescapable. My attention shifted to my section leader, who was approaching Megatron's vehicle. Intuitively, I felt that joining him might yield some insights into our current predicament. Gathering around Megatron, we listened intently as he spoke about the dangers of operating in such reduced visibility. A misplaced round from a Mark 19 grenade launcher, he pointed out, could easily spell disaster for all of us. His words were punctuated with levity when he mentioned everyone receiving an MJP, a jest that elicited chuckles from a few Marines. However, as my gaze scanned the group, it was evident that unease was the prevailing sentiment. Typically, Marines exude an aura of confidence, but the fog and the unknown had chiseled away at their resolve. Many bore hunched shoulders and crossed arms, a universal language of apprehension. Once Megatron concluded his pep talk, the gathering dispersed, each Marine taking with them his words of caution. My section leader and I began walking together. He posed a question, inquiring if I had spotted any figures in the woods during our trek. The mere mention of it caused a shiver down my spine. Acknowledging it, I relayed what my crew had reported, a shadowy entity, lurking just beyond our line of sight. He let out a weary sigh, expressing his disdain for the area. The revelation that followed was even more chilling. Apparently, bodies had been discovered on this range in the past. My section leader recounted a harrowing tale from his earlier days. He spoke of a time when, amidst a live fire exercise, something was seen dislodging from an old tank target. The firing was immediately halted. On closer inspection, they realized the grim truth. It was connected to a tragic story of a recon Marine who returned from deployment to discover his wife's infidelity. The haunting weight of the story served only to magnify the already eerie atmosphere of the range. The tragedy my section leader relayed was a grim tale indeed. He described the horrifying aftermath of a disgruntled Marine who had sought revenge on his unfaithful spouse and the men she had betrayed him with. This man had systematically hunted each of them down, ending their lives before burying them in the 1,000-yard line behind the very tank we were talking about. The discovery had been gruesome, an unsettling vision of human remains, unearthed by the blunt force of a 40mm grenade. Such visceral imagery left a deep-seated scar on the minds of those who bore witness, and my section leader confessed that nightmares continued to plague him even after all this time. My initial reaction was one of sheer horror and disbelief. Sometimes it seemed the cathartic act of sharing such harrowing experiences was the only way to cope with them, especially in an environment as rugged and unyielding as the Marine Corps. Yet, as unsettling as it was to know that such a malevolent individual was behind bars awaiting his fate, it was a stark reminder that not all monsters lurk in the shadows. Humans, with their complex psyches, can be just as malevolent. Our conversation veered towards discussing the questionable choices of some leaders, when suddenly my section leader froze in place, staring intently into the thick fog that enshrouded us. Following his gaze, I discerned the silhouette of a figure drawing near. It wasn't a Marine. There was an absence of body armor, and no semblance of a uniform. As the shadow drew closer, a palpable sense of dread enveloped me, my entire body tensing instinctively. It was as if my very core was alerting me to the imminent danger. With each step the shadow took, more details of its appearance became clear. I found myself simultaneously repulsed and in disbelief as I recognized the woman, not just from a previous encounter at a local strip joint, but also as the wife of a fellow Marine named Bag. But it was Bag's agonized scream from somewhere behind us that solidified the recognition. This was indeed his wife, yet her state was grotesque to say the least. Her limbs were twisted in unnatural directions, her face bruised and battered in a manner that recalled the horror images of ancient lynching events. But what was most horrifying was her lifeless gaze, her eyes devoid of any sign of life, her essence almost akin to a wandering specter. As I took in her battered appearance, another oddity struck me. Despite her seeming to be drenched in blood, there was no transfer of this crimson liquid onto Bag's uniform when he rushed to embrace her. The surreal image of this devastated Marine holding his grievously injured wife close, trying to find solace in their reunion, was deeply unsettling. Their lips moved, whispering words lost to the surrounding noise and distance, a silent exchange that left me feeling like an intruder on their private moment. Our platoon's corpsman rushed to the scene, driven by his professional duty. But like me, he too was inexplicably halted in his tracks, a mere couple of steps further than I had managed. It was as if an unseen force kept us at bay, not allowing us to intrude further on this harrowing reunion. The scene that unfolded before us grew increasingly distressing with every passing second. Our corpsman was nothing if not tenacious. It was clear to anyone watching that the man was deeply rooted in his sense of duty. Even though an invisible barrier kept him from reaching the injured woman, the man's resolve remained undeterred. No matter the bizarre nature of the situation, if he could have kept battling that unseen force for a millennium, he would have done so in an attempt to aid the injured woman. And then, for just a brief moment, amidst all the horrors that surrounded her, the woman's face lit up with a gentle smile that seemed almost out of place. It was an oasis of solace in a desert of bleakness. This fleeting expression had the power to alleviate some of the suffocating dread that gripped us. She raised her seemingly less injured arm, brushing a tear from Bag's face in a gesture that spoke of genuine affection and mutual love. Yet, as quickly as it appeared, the warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by an icy, steely hardness that seemed so out of place after such a tender moment. The change was palpable, and the ambience around us grew heavy with tension. The entire platoon, it seemed, had gathered. I hadn't noticed their silent arrival, but as I scanned the surroundings, the 52 of us stood in various states of bewilderment, all riveted by the unfolding drama. Among them, Bone Crusher stood nonchalantly with a cup of coffee, his face portraying sheer disbelief. The woman's maimed fingers slowly lifted and pointed. Every eye, including those of the ever-determined corpsman, followed its trajectory. All eyes, that is, except for one pair. Bag's crew chief found himself at the receiving end of her accusatory gesture. Bag's visage transformed, the anger etched on his features, something I'd never seen before. It was as if all his pain, confusion, and heartbreak were channeled into pure, unbridled rage. The emotional depth of that moment was shattered by the crew chief's audacious remark, belittling her profession and very existence. Bag's reaction was swift and decisive. He reached for the K-bar fighting knife that was securely attached to his chest armor. It struck me how that very knife, a tool for combat and survival that had been a part of the Marine Corps' legacy since the days of World War I, now seemed like a harbinger of impending doom. Bag's intent was crystal clear. As Bag approached the crew chief, a few of us tried to intervene. Our brave corpsman made an attempt to halt Bag's progress, only to be easily sidestepped. The crew chief's words seemed to have stripped away any reason or restraint from Bag. I, too, driven by a desire to protect Bag from future regret and legal repercussions more than any sympathy for the crew chief, endeavored to approach him. But that same unseen force that had earlier impeded our access to the injured woman now thwarted my attempt to reach Bag. I shouted desperately, urging him to reconsider, but it was as though my words were lost to the wind. Others too tried to de-escalate the situation, their voices joining in a cacophony of pleas and commands. The climax of this already bizarre day was rapidly approaching, and we were all powerless witnesses to its unfolding. The atmosphere had grown almost suffocating with tension, every one of us frozen in dread and anticipation. Collectively, we all wished to protect our brother in arms from making an irreparable mistake. Though emotions ran high, none of us wanted to stand by and watch Bag commit an act he could never take back. A crime that, while many might understand the rage that drove it, would undoubtedly cast a dark shadow over his life forever. But our wishes, fervent as they might have been, were powerless in the face of what was unfolding. Bag's advance towards the crew chief was inexorable, the intense anger emanating from him palpable. As Bag closed the distance between himself and the crew chief, the latter offered a feeble attempt to de-escalate the situation, but it was clear that words had long lost their efficacy. Seizing the crew chief by the collar of his body armor, Bag pulled him close, swiftly plunging the blade into the vulnerable area beneath his flak. I watched, heart pounding, as he twisted and dragged the blade in a brutal sideways arc. The crew chief's complexion shifted to a ghostly pallor, the shock evident on his face. The scene before us was macabre, like something straight out of a nightmare. And yet, despite the horror, I found myself noticing odd details, like the spilled remnants of a chilly McNamara on the uniform of a young Marine who had just joined our ranks a month prior. Such a detail, juxtaposed against the brutality of the scene, seemed surreal and yet sharply vivid in its incongruity. As the crew chief's screams turned into agonizing gurgles, the gravity of what had transpired began to truly sink in. In a final act of disturbing violence, Bag removed a grotesque chunk of flesh from the crew chief's face and cast it away with seeming indifference. Murmurs of shock rippled through our ranks. One of the more vocal members of our group, Megatron, gasped in disbelief. As I looked around, I wondered how we would ever relay the events of this day to our superiors. Bag's demeanor underwent yet another change. His previously affable and slightly goofy expression had transformed into something cold and steely. However, upon turning to look for his wife and finding her gone, his face seemed to register a brief moment of satisfaction. With our collective gaze still fixed on him, he methodically cleaned his blade, sending splatters of gore onto the grass. Then, in a heart-wrenching and wholly unexpected turn of events, he took his own life. The suddenness of the act left us all reeling. There were screams, most notably from our courtman, who now found himself helplessly witnessing 3 lifeless comrades, unable to assist or save any of them. The weight of the situation must have been an agonizing torture for him. When Bag finally fell, his life likely claimed by a combination of blood loss and asphyxiation, the oppressive force that had held us in place lifted. As we all tried to process the grim tableau before us, my section leader voiced the sentiment that I believe each one of us felt deep down, uttering a simple yet profoundly heavy statement: "I hate this place."